Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, ciao, bonjour, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hey, my name is Jedley. Welcome to Reading with Your Kids. We are coming to you from the oh-so-beautiful neighborhood of Reedville, in the shadow of the Great Blue Hills. We are so honored and so wicked happy that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. We do that by sharing fun, thoughtful, and thought-provoking conversations with fascinating people who just happen to write books for kids of all ages. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show and let them know that they can hear us on the WREB AM FM 24/7 radio network. And they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Good Pods, Podcast Addict, CastBox, Player FM, Boom Play, Ghana, wherever you find your favorite shows. Today we'll be welcoming two amazing authors to the show. First, Julie Whitney returns to celebrate Astra and Hollywood. And a little bit later on, we will meet Nancy Tupper Ling as she celebrates One Perfect Plan.
You've heard the whispers. You've seen it on TV. You may have even seen the movie. Now it's time to bring Dungeons and Dragons directly to you with D&D for Hire!
More than just a game, D&D lets you step into the role of a hero you create and guide them on fantastical adventures with your friends. Perfect for beginners and experts alike, D&D for Hire is sure to delight and entertain your kids for weeks on end.
Such a fun game. There are endless possibilities. There's so many things that you can do. It's so much fun.
Our son Eli loves D&D. It's like his favorite thing to do all week.
I was like 15 when I joined. I'm 21 now. There are people who are in our party, really learn to come out of their shells.
Whether you're near or far, whether you're looking for a birthday party or a campaign to keep you adventuring for years to come, D&D for Hire has you covered. Learn more at dndforhire.com. That's dndforhire.com. D&D for Hire, bringing the adventure to you. D&D for Hire runs games digitally over Zoom or in person in select areas.
Are you looking for a new book to add to your family library? Well, I have great news for you. Lynn Podrat, the award-winning author of Listen to Me, How My Down Syndrome Brother Saved My Life, has once again shared with us her family and a brand new book. It's called My Sister Wants an Elephant. Randy's sister wants a what? And his mom isn't flat out saying no? My Sister Wants an Elephant is a true story of two siblings who team up together to convince their mother to let them own a couple of wild animals as pets, and a mom who just might be persuaded. This book is full of humor and fun. It's a good lesson in not giving up on your dreams, no matter how truly wild they may be. Get your copy today. My Sister Wants an Elephant by Lynn Podrat. This episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by And the Trees Talk Back, written and illustrated by Frederick J. Burns, a gem in children's literature. And the Trees Talk Back is an enchanting and magical story about a young girl named Amanda who discovers she can talk to trees. The magical adventure and whimsical tree illustrations will delight adults and children of all ages and will inspire kindness, empathy, caring, and courage to stand against evil and give them a new appreciation of the trees that surround us. I love this book. It's a great way to inspire kids to see those who are different and who've been overlooked, and to understand that we can all be wonderful friends and that we're all part of a beautiful human family. Get your copy today. And the Trees Talk Back by Frederick J. Burns. Join us right now from Cincinnati in Ohio. Our guest is returning to the show to celebrate the brand new book in her series. It's called Astra and Hollywood. Please welcome back to the show, Julie Whitney. Hey, Julie, how are you?
Hey, Jed, I'm fabulous. Countdown has begun.
I am so excited to have you back. You know, we've had Hollywood stars on the show like Karen Parsons and Jasmine Simon and LeVar Burton. And now Astra is a Hollywood star in her own right.
Yes, she is. She's wondering if she's going to fit in Hollywood with all of her glitzy new friends.
So remind us who Astra is.
Astra is a lonely airplane. She's a G100 jet, and she lost her job due to the pandemic in 2020. And Captain Dan, who's my husband, and Captain Dan also in the book, comes into the hangar and tells Astra that the flight department's being eliminated and she's being sold, and they're both out of a job. So that's what the first book, Astra and Hollywood, or Astra the Lonely Airplane, is based on. Astra has to find a new owner, and she wonders if she's ever going to fly again.
And it sounds, if she made her way to Hollywood, that she found a new owner.
She did. So a nice new owner, after a bunch of quirky owners, potential owners come along, she finds a nice new owner that actually is a nice businessman who does a lot of charity work, and he lives in Hollywood. And so the first book ends when she lands in Hollywood and Captain Dan tucks her in and says goodnight. So the next book starts the first day in Hollywood at sunrise when Astra wakes up in her new glitzy hangar with red carpets and chandeliers and sees herself sitting beside 3 new hangar mates, and they're all quite different from her.
I sense that there's a little tension between Astra and her friends, the new friends, potential friends.
She's afraid she doesn't stack up because they can all do things that Astra cannot. So the first plane that she meets is Lana the Learjet, who has luscious red lips and long eyelashes, and she's very sultry and she's bright red. And she tells Astra that she carries rich and famous movie stars to their sets. So Astra's not real sure about this because she doesn't carry movie stars to their sets. And she's not very sexy like Lana. Then the next plane she meets is 10 times her size. His name is Hank, the cargo plane, and he carries overnight packages overseas. And Astra literally is so small we can barely even see the entire plane. Hank is so big you just see his nose because he's gigantic. And then the third plane, or aviation-related vehicle, I should say, that Astra meets is actually Helen the helicopter. And she's a little bit ditzy. And she can do things that Astra can't. She can actually hover very low on the ground, and she can fly backwards, too. And Astra definitely can't do any of those things. Yeah. So she feels a little bit inferior, and she's wondering if she's going to fit in with her new friends.
Wow. I love the personalities that you give the planes. It really shines through, and it's no wonder that kids love these stories.
When I read the book, I do use my voices. So Lana the Learjet is going to be very sophisticated, and Helen the helicopter is kind of ditzy and talks like this. And Hank the cargo plane is kind of a big monster. So I do use the voices. And then, of course, I have my regular Astra narrator voice, but the kids do love it when I go to schools.
I'm sure. And you are somebody who is very experienced in the land of public relations and marketing. So you are getting out there, and you've been in front of really hundreds and hundreds of kids.
Yes, I've actually found a good friend in Junior Achievement of Cincinnati has been bringing me to schools throughout the city for grades K through 3, even preschoolers. And I go to auditoriums, which are actually lunchrooms, and stand on the stage, and I have a big screen, and I read to up to 600 kids. And I actually show a PowerPoint on careers and how Captain Dan became a pilot. And then I talk about how I became an author and skills that you need to become an author or illustrator. And then I actually read the book on a big PowerPoint. And then at the end, I show them the video that accompanies the first book of Captain Dan giving them a tour of the real airplane. And they go nuts. And I often have to show that twice. And then at the very end, I show a video of actually Captain Dan taking off in Astra. And they really love that. And I wear my pilot uniform. And if Captain Dan's not flying the friendly skies, he comes with me. And it's so funny because the teachers will say, does anyone have any questions now for the author or the pilot? No one has any questions for the author. they all have questions for the pilot, like, what makes a plane fly? And how does the pilot go to the bathroom? And can he eat when he's in the cockpit? I mean, the questions that come out of their mouths are great. And I'm glad that they asked him what makes a plane fly. He's a lot better at answering that than I am.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm not asked that question either, because I'd say something like
it's magic,
fairy
right,
dust.
It's
yeah,
magic.
It's just. Well, I think one of the reasons the kids are so fascinated with Astra, in addition to the writing and the colors and the personality, is you're talking about a subject that we're all aware of. We see planes flying overhead all the time. We see them in the media, and occasionally we get to ride on a plane. But even when we're on a plane, we don't get a chance to really think and, ask questions, and we don't get a chance to see how things are working, and we don't also don't have a grasp, and especially kids don't have a grasp of the different types of vehicles that are flying and the jobs that they do. Planes are much more, they're doing a whole lot more than just taking families to Disneyland.
Yeah. And you know what? On that front, when I speak to schools, I often get thank you notes. And kids draw me pictures of Astra and Captain Dan, and they're absolutely adorable. And so many of the kids have said that they want to become pilots. And a couple kids said that they want to be an illustrator. And I wish I could find the one of Captain Dan, but it's a better drawing than even I could do. These kids are talented. But yeah, I think I'm opening kids' eyes up. And I also talk about the fact that I think it's still 8% of the world's pilots, the stats may have changed slightly, are female. And that we need more women pilots. Mm-hmm. So I hope I'm inspiring kids to, look for a career in aviation.
Yeah. And because those can be very rewarding careers.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's been very good to Captain Dan. He started out as a Navy pilot. He went to the U.S. Naval Academy, and then he actually flew a cargo plane, much like Hank, which is how I came up with the idea for Hank the cargo plane. He flew packages overnight. And now he flies a corporate gig, which is actually how he met Astra, the G100 plane that he was flying.
Yeah. Those cargo planes, especially the military ones, there have been times that I've been driving on the interstate, and I'll be near an Air Force base, and I'll see one of those things take off, and they're so big. You sit there going, this couldn't possibly fly. And it looks like they're going so slow, and it's like I'm baffled. I'm like, this isn't physically possible. I am watching magic here.
Some of them can hold like a car or airplane inside. I mean, they're huge.
Yeah. It's interesting that your career as an author was spurred on by the pandemic. Was it just a way to cope with your husband losing his job and you being at home and the world being shut down? Was it just, I have to do something so I don't go crazy?
It actually was more than that. I guess we were all going crazy. My husband actually almost cut off his thumb remodeling our basement after he lost his job. But so I went with him the day he got laid off, May 5th of 2020. And helped him clean out his office and the hangar and say goodbye to the plane. And I cry every time I tell this story because I said, can I sit inside the plane? Even though I've never flown in her, I've gotten to sit in her stationary in the hangar. I said, I want to say goodbye to her. And I started crying, and I thought, you have flown this plane for 13 years, several days a week. You've flown her as far away as Brazil. He knew all her quirks. He knew everything about that plane. Even though she was owned by someone else, she was really his baby. He was the one that flew her day in and day out. He's the one that washed and waxed her. I mean, he did everything for that plane. So I just got so emotional. I thought, what's going to happen to this beautiful plane? She would have been $10 million new when she was made in, I think, 2006. She's just sitting here in this hangar rusting away, and I started crying. And it was I wasn't just mad, I was sad and emotional. And I said, what's going to happen to her if she just sits in this dark hangar rusting away? And he said, well, Julie, if someone doesn't start her engines up every 28 days, she's going to be in pretty bad shape. So we actually did get paid to go in while she sat there and they were trying to sell her to a new owner. Every 28 days he went in and started up her engines. But it was really the emotion. And actually a lot of my clients, my public relations clients, had interesting pandemic stories to tell. So my business slowed down a little, but not that much, because one of my clients was a health club, and their story is how they were sanitizing and getting ready to reopen and putting in a new air filtration system. Another client, who's a facial plastic surgeon, was actually having drive up, not plastic surgery services, but drive up. You could still buy your products out of your car. So they were, and my other client, Angel's Paws, who does home euthanasia for pets, was actually going safely into people's garages and other outdoor spaces so they could still have their pets put down safely, wearing masks in the midst of the pandemic. So they all adapted. So I actually had quite a few news stories on the new normal for my clients. Wow. But yes, this kept me sane too. And since Captain Dan was home, you could run a lot of my ideas by him, and he gave me his, creative input, and came up with some good ideas. I actually am working on writing a children's streaming series.
Wow.
And I have 18 episodes written.
Wow. Tell us a little bit more about that.
If you're out there and you're a Hollywood producer and you want to pick up this series, I have a third book written, Astra's Canine Rescue, and then the publishing process takes a while. So I'm way ahead of, where the whole publishing situation is. So I actually started mapping out an animated series where it could be Astra and Friends, where Astra and her 3 friends all have new adventures where they save the day. I've come up with ideas for Astra in Italy, Astra in France, Astra's Hurricane Rescue, Astra's, I have a feline rescue. I just have so many stories floating around in my brain about how this airplane and her friends can save the day using their unique skills. So I either just need someone very rich to finance it, or I need the right Hollywood connection. I want to be on Apple or Hulu or Netflix or somewhere with the children's show. Then I could quit the day job.
I think that's a great dream, and I have a feeling if there's anybody who can make that happen, it is you.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Hey, you talked about Captain Dan and his relationship with the plane. Is that usual for, a pilot to develop that close bond with an airplane?
I think Astra was special. If you talk to pilots, they all love the G100. It was the first Gulfstream jet. It was called the Astra, and it was made in Israel. And for some reason, that plane is just a one of a kind, because they now have the Gulfstream, I don't know, like 880 or something. And that, even though Captain Dan is flying newer and glitzier planes now, I think Astra will always be in his heart as one of his favorites. He has a close friend that also flies a different G100, and he feels the same way. I don't know enough about it, but I just know that it was the first of its kind, and pilots are very loyal to that particular plane.
Okay. All right. Well, I think it's I have a feeling if I ever learned how to fly a plane, I'd get very close to whatever plane brought me down safely.
I don't think I'm cut out for it. Captain Dan used to fly us around the little Cessna 182, and we belong to a flying club, and I don't think I have the wherewithal to do it. I don't think I can compartmentalize. I don't think I'm calm and collected enough. One of our flights, we flew to our cottage in upstate New York, which is usually an 11-hour drive, and we made it in 4 hours in this little plane. And during the flight, the radio went out, and Captain Dan just pulled out a manual mic and plugged it in and talked over that. And he was so calm. He's like, "No problem, baby, I got this." And he just plugged in a little mic, and I was a nervous wreck, but he's very good at handling anything like that. So
that's wonderful. I don't know if we spoke about this the last time you were on, but during the pandemic, I had my own little airplane adventure. My niece was wanting very much to kind of do something different. And so my daughter's fiance has a friend who's a pilot, and he was teaching at that time, and he said, I'll take you up in my little whatever it was. And we went up, and as we were getting into the plane, my niece said, oh, you go sit up front because you're my uncle. And I said, no, you sit up front, because I knew once we get up there, the pilot was going to say, take over. And he did. And she freaked out. What do you mean, take over? Yeah, just keep grab the steering wheel and make it, no, turn that way. And she did. And it was a blast. She also was in terror, but she did it, and it was a lot of fun.
We did the same thing. We took a client of mine who's the plastic surgeon I mentioned, Dr. John Mendelsohn, up flying for fun one weekend when we still were with the Cessna in our flying club, and Dan let him take over, and he was amazing. He said, because Dr. Mendelsohn has the steady hands of a surgeon, he was just a natural and did a great job. And his wife was in the back seat, and she's like, oh my gosh, he's flying the plane. It was funny, but he did a great job.
Yeah. I'm just glad my niece didn't have to land the plane. I don't know if that would have went so well.
Oh, you know what? I thought about taking flight lessons. I just don't. The takeoff and the landing, they just scare me.
Yeah. The up in the air part seems okay.
Especially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because you have to line it up just right. Dan was explaining to me with this little plane, and if it's windy, the little planes are hard to, they're like topsy-turvy.
Yep.
Yeah. They can bounce.
Yeah. One of the things we're going in one direction, but the plane's butt was kind of out, so we're kind of flying like diagonally, going straight. It's hard to explain.
Yeah,
but
I get what you're saying.
I think Astra and Astra and Hollywood it's just a great way to engage in kids in conversations about dreams. Obviously, there's conversations about fitting in and friendships and loyalty, but just to, getting kids to dream. And what would it be like to be a pilot? What would it be like to fly a cargo plane or a helicopter? And if you don't want to be a pilot, what are your dreams? What would you love to do in the future?
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
In fact, when they bring me into schools, when junior team brings me to schools, they talk about, it's usually part of a career day, and they talk about entrepreneurship, actually. And they talk about, and when I get introduced, the principal will say, now a writer, we learned about writers, they're an entrepreneur. An illustrator is an entrepreneur, and we talk about what being an entrepreneur is. So it does fit in, and I think that's great.
And I'm really, really happy because we do have a lot of authors and aspiring authors who listen to the podcast, and I can't help but take every opportunity I can to remind those authors and aspiring authors that, yes, you're an artist. Yes, you're an author. You're a writer. But if you're writing a children's book or writing any kind of book, you're also the CEO of a small business. You are an entrepreneur.
You are.
And you have to think that way.
And I always help other writers. I can't tell you how many people have contacted me out of the blue. Everyone has a children's book, right? Everyone has a story idea in their head. And I've told them precisely how I did it. And I've said, you have to have thick skin. You have to be good at rejection. You have to Google and find every literary agent or publishing house that you can, until that person says yes, and never give up. But I've helped so many people about my process and how I went about it. You need to have a written manuscript. Some publishers use the query manager where you get an automated response. It's kind of like the common application for colleges, right? You just keep submitting the same thing over and over, and it's automated. And I got a lot of automatic rejections from those people, but the people that really actually took the time to read it without an automated system, I really got a lot of positive feedback, and that kept me going. Like a couple people said, your rhyming is spot on, but I'm just too small right now to tackle any more clients. So, the few bits of positive feedback really kept me going through all the rejection. I think I probably submitted it. I started submitting in June, and I signed with my publisher in August.
Wow.
So it only took me really like 2 steady months, but I probably sent I don't know, to 30 or 40 different houses or literary agents total.
Mm-hmm. And that's what it takes. And in fact, parents who are listening, that's a good lesson to teach our kids to be resilient and be persistent, because nothing comes unless you're persistent. Very, very few people get the job on the first application.
And take the criticism or feedback and then tweak your manuscript.
Yeah.
And a couple people said, I don't read rhyming books, and that's it.
Okay.
So, but I know I've been told the rhyming's spot on, so I'm going to keep at it.
Oh, that's wonderful. Hey, Julie, tell everybody where we can go to find out more about Astra and Hollywood and all of the Astra books that are going to be coming out.
Well, you can visit my website at astrathelonelyairplane.com. That's ASTRA. And there's actually free activity and coloring sheets for parents and teachers to download for a rainy day that supplement the book. You can also order personally signed copies of either book from me on my website, but it's also available at everywhere books are sold in 11 countries and on bookshop.org, and also, of course, on Amazon.
We've had a great time speaking to the author of Astra and Hollywood, the latest book from our friend Julie Whitney. Julie, thank you so much for being back with us.
Thanks, Jed. It's good to see you upright and well.
Thank you. This episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by The Missing Red Envelopes, a fun middle grade novel by our friend Yobi Q. As the Lunar New Year approaches, two Asian American girls from New York City eagerly anticipate the festive celebrations, from watching the vibrant parade to indulging in delicious Asian cuisine and cherishing precious family moments. The highlight of the occasion is receiving lucky red envelopes filled with surprises from their relatives. However, excitement turns to mystery when Weena realizes she's lost all of the red envelopes. What in the world will they do? Encourage readers to dive into the story, celebrate cultural diversity, and enjoy a heartwarming adventure with The Missing Red Envelopes by our friend Yobi Q. This episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by Lucas and the Game of Chance, a thrilling middle grade novel written by Anthony L. Mena. It is a Reading with Your Kids certified great read. While Lucas is playing his flute at the seawall one day, he befriends a mysterious talking dancing snake that rewards him with fortune and favor. Some years later, tempted by greed and pride, Lucas loses all of his riches and his family. He now must set off on a treacherous journey through a frightening forest filled with suspense and strange creatures. To find Destiny, her son, Ilion, the sun, her daughter, Luna, the moon. These celestial guardians will surely allow him to reverse his misfortune, restore his honor, and win back all that he loves and treasures. Won't they? This is a reimagined Greek folk tale, Lucas in the Game of Chance. It's illuminated with dramatic and evocative pen and ink drawings that provide an ideal backdrop for the dark intrigue that fills this haunting story of human struggle, courage, and resilience. You and your kids are going to love it. Lucas and the Game of Chance by Anthony L. Mena. It is a Reading with Your Kids certified great read. This episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by the books by Robert Provan, Sammy and Scarlett's Mangrove Adventure and Sammy and Scarlett's Coral Reef Adventure. The first book in the series, Mangrove Adventure, recounts the tale of two young fish who live in a tidal pool in the Florida Keys. Sammy is a sergeant major fish, and Scarlett is a yellow-tailed snapper. They are different species from one another, and they don't look anything alike. But despite this, they become best of friends. They learn that it's not the color of the fish's scales that matters, but rather whether or not they have a loving heart. Sammy and Scarlett's Coral Reef Adventure is the second book in the series and tells the story of Sammy and Scarlett's continuing journey from the shelter of the mangrove forest in search of their adult home on the coral reef. The two fish are befriended along the way by Howie, the hawkbill sea turtle, who helps them through the dangers they will face ahead. Together, the three explore the amazing underwater city that is a coral reef. You and your family are going to love these books. Check them out today. The Books by Robert Provan. Join us right now from not too far from our beautiful studios here in lovely Reedville. Our guest is here today to celebrate her beautiful children's book. It's called One Perfect Plan. Please welcome to the show my neighbor, Nancy Tupper Ling. Hey, Nancy, how are you?
Howdy, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Delighted to have you on. Nancy and I were just reflecting on all the places we've probably been to at the same time and didn't know it.
Yes,
Yeah.
like good old buffets.
Good old buffets. Yeah, kind of buffets of, at least definitely here in the Northeast, they've kind of gone out of style. They were going out of style, and then the pandemic came along, and then no one wanted to, share food.
That's true.
So tell us about One Perfect Plan. I guess, buffets weren't a perfect plan, but what is the One Perfect Plan?
Yes. Well, I guess a bit of the explanation for this book is in the subtitle, which is the Bible's big story in tiny poems. So that is sort of the intent of the book, presenting the big Bible story through short couplets that I've written on well, not all of the stories, the highlighted stories that I chose through the Bible. So it's kind of a daunting task.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it is a daunting task when you think about it. You're talking about, kind of summarizing or helping kids understand what is the most read book in history.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about a book that is the foundation, at least the Hebrew Testaments, of the three major religions here in the world. That has billions of followers. So yeah, that's a pretty big task to take on.
I know. Now I'm more scared. What was I doing? Yeah, so I definitely didn't come at it from I'm not a theological expert. I'm not a pastor. I'm a poet, and I came at it from that aspect. But I just was thinking that the stories that I loved as a child, I remember my parents reading, one of these big classic children's Bibles, and it was great. They would mark the dates that we read the stories in my Bible. I still have it, but it was a process. It took a while to get through it. And I was thinking, what if this is sort of the overview for a child, or a family to see, some of the highlighted stories. And I hope, my intent is that some of the themes come out that you might not catch on to when you're kind of slogging through the bigger Bible. So I hope that's what happened.
One of the things, and I'm certainly not a theological scholar by any means, but I've studied world religion and tried to become very more familiar with my own faith tradition than most folks, or at least more than I was when I was just going to church. And, one of the things I found is that I don't think the Bible and the people who were contributing to the Bible meant it to be a tough slog. It wasn't meant to be something that we could only understand through the wisdom of experts and theologians. Jesus, I'm a Christian, Catholic Christian, and Jesus loved talking to kids, and he wasn't talking to scholars. He was talking to normal, regular people like you and me, and I think that's kind of who the Bible was intended for. Yes.
I love that. And even just, with the New Testament, with the letters that were written, I mean, you think about, I still like to write letters. Now they're emails usually for people, but, some things were repeated over and over in the letters, the emphasis of get along, you people. And I just think, hopefully that is what comes through with the poems is that love of God for creation, for people, and what sacrifice would be done for us. To me, that's hopefully one of the themes that comes through. Just as an example, the very first poem, well, also the title one is indicating that each of the poems starts with one. So it's like one person or one faith or one sling for David, one stone for David and Goliath. So that's also a theme that goes throughout, as if to show that even Jed and I can do one thing or one role that's important. So one of the first poems is actually about one word. And the word that started the whole creation story is one word, then light breaks into darkness, the skies, the seas, and life, how wondrous. So I just think, that's the start of creation. And then it goes from there, with the flood, one drop, then two, and then water floods the land. So I kind of had this theme going as well of what can one person do? What can one faith do for you? What can, one woman at the well, what can, so there's a theme of one as well, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
And I think that's such an important theme for us to share with our kids, is that we were created intentionally, and that we were created with the ability to make a difference in the world, to make a positive difference in the world. And, we don't have to go out and change the entire world, but we can change one person's world. And I think that's something that we're all called to do. And what a beautiful, challenging thing to teach our kids.
Yeah, I think you're doing that with your podcast too. Not to, throw you under the bus, but I mean, I think whatever gifts we have, hopefully we're using them, and I guess that's what I'm trying to do with my children's picture books as well, to be there for people and to show them different ideas and themes and stories that might influence their life, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you were mentioning, and we both were talking about how daunting this project was and how big it was and how important it was. I'm wondering what inspired you to take on such a challenge?
Good question. Yeah, I actually had to kind of recently, I looked back because, when you have projects that are sitting around in drawers for a long time, this was one of those. I think it started in 2007. So I had a 7 and a 5-year-old back then. And, it actually started after an Easter service. I was coming out of a church service and thinking about that one stone rolled away and how that, if for our faith as Christians, if that stone wasn't rolled away, then what are we believing in, right? That's the important hinge of our faith, is that Jesus was not there. There was a resurrection. So then I started thinking too about, I went down a road of rocks and stones, honestly. I started thinking, Goliath, David slew Goliath with one stone. And then I thought about Jesus being the cornerstone. So I was doing all this rocky research, and then realized it was more about the one aspect, what the one intent was, what the one person was doing, than the stone. So I branched out and decided to cover more stories. And then, being the librarian, I went to check out about 12 to 15 children's Bibles that already existed to see, okay, what were the stories that were covered typically, and did I want to cover Cain and Abel in a small picture book of, 16 spreads. And so that helped me to see, what were the typical stories that were covered for children. It was also important for me to include women, because I think God includes women in his story, the story. And so even on the cover, there's Queen Esther and Mary, but other lesser known women, the woman in the well, Ruth and Naomi. So I wanted to make sure to include the females in the Bible story as well. So,
well, I'm certainly glad you did, because, from my reading of the Bible, I think women played, as we would say here in Boston, Nancy, women played a wicked important role in Jesus' ministry.
Definitely.
Yeah.
We would say that in Boston.
We would say that in Boston. Hey, one of the things that I love to talk about, we're not a religious show here, that the Reading with Your Kids podcast, not a religious show. People who've listened to the show have probably heard me talk about the fact that I am a Catholic Christian. But I believe that there is value in every faith tradition, and I also respect people who don't have a faith tradition. I think there's something that everybody can learn from each other's traditions. What specifically, if there's somebody out there that is not a Christian, not Jewish, not Muslim, who doesn't, look at the Bible as a place typically a place where they go for wisdom, or a family that doesn't have any faith tradition, what do you think they can get from One Perfect Plan?
It's an awesome question. I think it actually just happened the other day to me. What I would hope is I was signing a book I work at a little bookstore in Dedham, so not far from you. And when I was working, I was signing my book for somebody, and this young girl came up and she just started asking me all kinds of questions. I mean, there's just a curiosity that we can't, discourage for children. And she said, is that Jesus on the cover? And I said, yeah, it is. And she started asking me like, oh, do you believe in Jesus? And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, for New England, this conversation is taking an interesting turn here, But, she just started like looking at the stories and asking me more about them. And I just think, it is, like you said, the foundation of so much literature, that we can't overlook it. And I just hope it's an entryway. It's not supposed to be the be all and end all, but as a story, but I feel like it's a jumping off point for a conversation to say, what do you think about the story of Daniel and the lions? And certainly we can all relate to a strength that comes in a time of trouble. There are a lot of stories in the Bible that are happening under, desperate situations. And this little girl was just curious about those stories. And that's what I hope happens. Maybe each story has a reference to the actual Bible text in it. So you could go further if you wanted to. But just to know that this is part of our lexicon that we have, for centuries. So I think that's great that she was curious.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I think would be most valuable about a book like One Perfect Plan, because, we encourage families not only to read with their kids, and that's so important, but I personally think it's the conversations that we have afterwards that is so powerful in the lives of our kids. It's so powerful in bringing us together with our kids, building that bond. And I think it is the beginning of lifelong conversations. And I think that our faith is absolutely something that we should be having ongoing conversations with our kids about. We should be having conversations about it with everybody, especially our pastors, and especially about anybody who tells me that Jesus wants me to hate somebody else. Anyway, let me go off that. But having these conversations with our kids, it's a great way for our kids to help instill values, to encourage our kids to really think about what values we want them to hold near and dear to their heart, and help them understand that, hey, if this isn't something that is connecting with you, well, I'm still going to love you.
Mm-hmm.
we can talk about
Mm-hmm.
it and, kind of grow with each other.
For sure. And that doubt too. I mean, we need to be honest that we have had those doubts, and the people in the Bible stories have doubts. I mean, they run away. Jonah ran away and kept running away, so I think those are great conversations. For me, one of the stories that stands out too, I do have to say Alina Chow is the illustrator, and her illustrations are just gorgeous. So check it out even just for that, but I think she brings to life so many of those stories. She did so much research behind, what is done in Celtic Christianity art, and, what is done in medieval art. And, so one of the stories that stands out illustratively is, Ruth and Naomi, that Ruth chose to not go, with her own family, but to go with her mother-in-law essentially and stay with her after a very devastating experience in their lives where they lost their husbands. So to me, like you're saying, to take a story like that and show a child, look at this friendship. What's your friendship like? What would you do for a friend? Like all those, like we said, deep themes are there, and the discussions, that come from that is what I enjoy the most, just to, hopefully people will use this book in church environments too, to have those discussions. But I love it when it's just, in a bookstore,
Mm-hmm.
and somebody comes up and wants to know more. So that's great.
Yeah. And I love that you're using the word friendship with this book, because that was one of the things that I wanted my kids to understand, that I wanted my kids to think of God, think of Jesus as their friend,
Mm-hmm.
as somebody who loves them and is going to be there for them, as somebody that they can depend on and count on.
Yes. And I think you can compare this to so much out there that's in literature as well. I mean, even like take Harry Potter, and what were their friendships like, that kept them going and close together. So, I mean, you were asking about how it can be used outside of the faith. And I think that is, with some of those themes, they resonate throughout literature and throughout our lives. Like, these are important things for kids on a day-to-day basis when you're getting on the school bus.
Yep.
Hopefully you have some good friends.
Yeah. And I think too that a book like this, and talking about the stories in this book, and maybe the way that you put together the book, it can be a start of a lifelong conversation about the Bible, and helping kids as they get older understand that, hey, this isn't like Harry Potter, where an author sat down and started writing Genesis and then went through to write Revelations. This is actually a collection of books that were written over probably a couple of centuries by different authors, for different audiences. And, it's the start of, helping them to understand why this might have been said in this way, and the same story was told to a different group in a different way. And that's, there's just so much. And it's such an important book that I think it's something that, again, it just deserves those conversations to help our kids have a better understanding of it.
Yeah. And I'm hoping that, perhaps I'm not good at this, but perhaps I have seen some friends send videos of their children memorizing some of the poems. And to me, that's like, wow, that's what I would love too, to be able to like have something in your head, whether it's the actual Bible verse, which is even better, but also to have, a poem that's easy to carry with you when you need to like think back on something in a difficult time, to be like, hey, God was there with Daniel in the lion's den. God can be there with me now in this situation. And certainly, that would be a wonderful thing. And I've seen that, people are sending videos of their grandchildren already using it that way, or somebody started to sign to some of the stories. Ooh, and I thought, wow, that's so cool. Like things that you don't even expect will happen with your book. So I'm excited about that.
Very, very cool. So what's next for Nancy Tupper Ling? You took on an easy subject like the Bible. What's next? We're going to be doing poems about quantum physics or something.
I have heard that there's a big desire for poetry and science. But I don't know if that's my role. But I've worked on another co-authored book that's coming out. So my co-author June Kotner is a big anthologist, and so we have one called Bless the Earth coming out for Earth Day in 2024. It's a collaboration of many poets and poems about the Earth. So I'm looking forward to that one. And after that, there's one called Hearts in My Pocket. That's a story about a little child dealing with divorce. So I got the whole gamut.
Yeah, you do. And again, being from Massachusetts, any poems about a guy from Nantucket? That's a local thing. No one else will get that one.
Yes.
Hey, Nancy, where can we go to find out more about One Perfect Plan and more about you?
Oh, thank you so much. Just my name, NancyTupperling.com, will get you everywhere you need to go. Thank you.
We've had a really wonderful time speaking to the author of One Perfect Plan, beautiful children's book that is telling the Bible's big story from our guest, Nancy Tupper Ling. Nancy, thanks so much for being with us.
Hey, I'll see you at the buffet.
Imagine shouting, "My life is magic," alongside your friends and family, and for a few moments, feeling the truth of it. That's the clown energy families felt in El Salvador during a recent Clowns Without Border tour. In our universe, imaginative play is a tool, a bridge for people experiencing displacement caused by conflict, political turbulence, economic struggle, and environmental crisis. El Salvador, where people face multiple causes of displacement, found itself in the spotlight of a tour in November 2023. I was one of the clowns on stage in El Salvador for that 2023 tour, and I have to tell you, it was a magical experience. The kids, their parents, their grandparents, they just beamed with joy and hope at our performance. I would love for you to be a part of the next Clowns Without Border tour. And a great way to do that is by supporting our fundraiser over on Facebook. It's facebook.com/readingwithyourkids. Great, easy way. Click a button, make a donation. The kids and the families that you're going to bring hope to, they're going to really appreciate it. I'm going to appreciate it too. Please check it out. Reading with Your Kids fundraiser for Clowns Without Borders on Facebook, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reading with Your Kids and will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. Please be sure to connect with us on social media. I already told you where you can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram and TikTok at Reading with Your Kids. We are at Jedley Magic on Twitter. We have a great YouTube channel, youtube.com/readingwithyourkids. And we would love for you to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. You can check out our blog, download our free online magazine, visit our Reading with Your Kids certified Great Read Wall of Fame, and use the contact button up at the top of the page to send us a message. Let us know what you love about the show, what we could be doing better, and who you would like to hear on a future episode of the show. And if you are an author, please be sure to click the Authors Click Here button at the top of the page to find out how you can be a guest on the show. Being a guest, it's fun, it's easy, and it gives you the chance to tell thousands of Kidlit fans all about your great kids book. You can also learn about our effective and very affordable promotional services. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we want to thank our amazing sponsors. Please be sure to check out their websites. I want to thank our guests, Julie Whitney and Nancy Tupper Ling. And my team, they deserve a big thank you. Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Chris Doherty, Skylar Strauss, Nick Warner, Kyoko Ito, Kayla Newland, Kristen Barrett, Sydney Swan, Hannah Rose. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to make the world a better place. You do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.